working? All right, cool. So, as he said, my name is now Angela Stokes Monarch. We just got married 2 months ago. And have I got green stuff in my tea? Okay, I usually do. I was just eating chlorella. I was like, that's not the greatest social thing to come up on stage with green stuff in your tea. All right, so my intention for sharing today, I was wanting to share some of my background with raw foods, my transformation, and some of my top tips for being happy and healthy as a raw foodist, maybe touching into the social and emotional areas, dealing with cravings, those kind of things. So that's my intention. We've only got 50 minutes, so let's see how it goes. Now, some of you said you weren't so familiar with my story already, so there's a couple of things I always bring along to my talks to help me share where I'm coming from, and this is one of them. It's a little photo album of before and after pictures of me. So you can take a look through these. I'm going to pass them around. There's quite a lot of pictures, and there's quite a lot of you. We don't have that much time, so maybe don't dwell on all of them. Like, was that really her? I know that's what happens to me when I look at these pictures, but I'm going to start passing those around. You can take a look at those. And I have another trusty prop that I always bring along to these talks to help me share where I'm coming from. And it's the famous blue dress. Has anybody seen this blue dress before? No? Did anybody see me on CNN last year? All right, you can check that out online. CNN News did a story about my raw food weight loss. It was actually the biggest health story of the year on CNN last year. It had so many millions of viewers, my entire website got just scattered to nothing. It just completely obliterated my website. And I showed those guys the blue dress, and you get to see it too, in person. So this used to be my favorite dress when I used to be nearly 300 pounds, about 7, 8 years ago. And you could see, you know, I could probably do the talk with somebody else in here now. So this kind of thing helps me to remember where I'm coming from and that I'm actually talking about myself when I give these talks, because I so often feel like I'm talking about somebody else. You know, my life is so completely different these days to how it used to be. If you want to see more of my videos and pictures and all those kind of things, you can always go to my website, which is rawreform.com. I always have to say this really clearly because I'm from England and people don't understand me otherwise if I don't say it clearly. I'm going to pass around some postcards for our website as well, so you can check that out if you have never been there. So yeah, rawreform.com is my main website. So my story, how did I get to nearly 300 pounds? I definitely didn't start off anywhere near that. I was very, very active and slim as a young child. I was the fastest runner in my school. I was swimming, dancing, you name it. I was all over the place. Everything changed for me at the age of 11. My thyroid went underactive. So my metabolism slowed down. I started to gain weight, got into a vicious circle with food. The bigger I got, the less active I wanted to be, so the bigger I got, and it just went on and on. I literally gained weight for an entire decade. From the age of 11 until 21, I just blew up like a balloon for a decade until I reached breaking point. You know, if you push a body that fast, something's got to give, right? I pushed myself right to the edge of diabetes. And this was back in the year 2002. My whole life changed with the introduction of this book. Somebody lent me Raw Family by the Botenkos. Has anybody read this one? Yay! All right. Has anybody not heard of the Botenkos here? One person. All right. Botenkos, Russian family, live in the US, went raw years ago. And this little book is their testimonial of what happened when they went raw. So I was living in Iceland at the point at which this book was lent to me. Now, if I'm still here 7 years later and I'm still raw and I went raw in Iceland, I really think anyone can do this, you know. So my friend lent me this book. I read the whole thing in one night, and it just completely resonated for me as truth. I wasn't one of those people who was very big and had tried every diet under the sun, every kind of slimming pill, yada, yada, yada. I'd never tried any of that stuff. I had no interest in it. I just wanted to eat. That's what I did all day long. If I wasn't eating, I was thinking about food. And the kind of things I was eating were the kind of things that are the most damaging for the body. Breads, pastas, pizzas, cakes, cookies, all of the highly refined foods that the body can't even recognize. That's what I was up to for the first 23 years of my life, pretty much. So when I read this book, it just resonated for me as truth, and I went 100% raw vegan the next day from being the kind of person who couldn't walk past McDonald's. You know, that's who I used to be, and as I'm sure a lot of you guys can imagine, that was a pretty intense detox to put myself into. 300 pounds into raw vegan overnight is not something I recommend. I like to encourage people to take it slowly. Start out at least 50% raw and take it from there towards 100% raw if you ever go there. You know, you don't get a halo if you make it to 100% raw. You don't get like an award on the wall. It's just a choice. And I actually stayed 100% raw for 1 week in the beginning. And that was enough for me. At that point, I couldn't handle it. You know, it was way too much. I took a step back to being about 70, 80% raw. And that's what I did for the first 2 years on this journey. And in that time frame, I released 160 pounds. That was enough. You know, in the first year alone, I released 105 pounds. There's probably people in this room, or we know people who weigh about that much, right? I lost that in 1 year from this frame. So 70, 80% raw was plenty enough for me. About 5 years ago now, I came back to the point of eating 100% raw, and I have been ever since. And by that time, I'd been on this path long enough that it no longer felt dramatic and crazy. And my last thing in the cooked food world was rice cakes. I don't know if anyone can identify with that, but I had given up so many things. You know, I'd stopped eating bread, I'd stopped eating pasta, all these kind of things. I was eating a packet a day of rice cakes. And one day I looked at them and thought, why do I eat these things? You know, they're disgusting. They taste like cardboard. There's no nutrition in them. And that was it. The next day I started eating flax crackers, and I've been totally 100% raw ever since then. And that's just what feels good to me now, you know. The point that I've come to with my health, I no longer get ill anymore, which to me is an incredible blessing considering my background. There were points where I used to be on 14 or 15 different allopathic pills a day going into this body. Because, like I said, if you push a body that far, something's got to give, right? I was always ill. I was on thyroid medication for 13 years, and I came off that when I went raw. And I'm not standing here suggesting if you or anyone you know is on thyroid meds to just come off it and go raw, but this is my story. I came off the thyroid meds when I went raw, and now my thyroid is totally naturally balanced, and this is what I do. I take kelp tablets every day. I had a homeopath help me for the first 6 months to come off the thyroxine, and I eat seaweeds pretty much every single day, and I'm totally raw, and I'm active. And my thyroid is naturally balanced. So I am incredibly grateful to be able to be here as a living testimony that I can come off those kind of medications, and we can heal our bodies naturally. Because when I look around in this society especially, the majority of people are overweight or obese now in this society. 1 in 3 people is not overweight or obese now here. Imagine that. It's incredible the way I kind of look at it as humans are eating themselves into the grave. You know, it's like a way of slowly embalming yourself. The last few lectures I've been telling people a little thing that I heard recently, which isn't necessarily the most charming thing to share, but I think it's very telling. Apparently a lot of American corpses are now not being eaten. They're not rotting. Because people are literally embalming themselves. They're preserved. So I'm sorry if any of you are eating right now or anything, but I just think that's really interesting, you know, that's the point that this has come to. So one of the most recent parts of my journey has been juice feasting. Has anyone here juice feasted? All right. Has anyone not heard of juice feasting? Okay, cool. So juice feasting is, most people have heard of juice fasting. What's the difference? Well, juice feasting, as the name suggests, is all about abundance. So when you juice feast, you generally take at least 4 quarts a day of fresh raw juice into your body. That's a gallon of juice going into your body a day. This is the little booklet that I wrote all about juice feasting called A Juice Feaster's Handbook. And I did this for 92 days a few winters back down in Costa Rica. And it was one of the most transformative periods of my life. I'd already been raw for 4.5 years at the point at which I did this. And living on just juice for 3 months is a pretty enormous thing to do. And people were asking me, why are you doing that? Haven't you detoxed enough? Well, I don't come from an average background. I come from morbid obesity, my background. So there are still things even now that I know I still have to work on in this structure. Like, has anybody seen our TV show? We do like a daily online TV show. Cool. If you haven't seen that, you can check it out at therawfoodworld.tv, therawfoodworld.tv. We put up a little daily TV show about raw food. And I was speaking there recently about these lumps on my head. Has anyone heard about these guys? Some of you? All right, so this is kind of like a relic from my morbid obesity days. I have 6 fat cysts hanging around up here on my scalp. They're not doing anything, they're totally benign. You can come and touch them if you want. They don't bite. They're just hanging around. And this, to me, is one of those little indications I still have detox work to do. I got these guys hanging around. I kind of think of it as, at some point, my body was just like, we don't know what to do with all this stuff. You just keep putting stuff in, and we're just going to put it up here. And one day, you can just deal with it. So this is like one of my relics, and this was one of the reasons why I was excited to do juice feasting, to see where else my detox would go. These guys didn't change, but one of the things that did really strike me about it, 92 days into living on nothing but liquid, nothing but juice going in here, I was still having solid bowel movements. Yeah, if that doesn't say something about how much there is to release from these things, then I don't know what does, I wouldn't have believed that until I actually experienced it for myself. And of course, I don't come from an average background. I come from morbid obesity. We've probably all heard those statistics that the average person has 5 to 10 pounds of waste hanging around inside here in the intestines. And people like John Wayne apparently had like 40 pounds of stuff in there. Elvis had about 20. These are really exciting statistics to share with your family. So maybe I've got a bit less now, who knows. But yeah, 92 days, bowel movements the whole way through. It was a pretty incredible experience. One of the other things that really struck me about that, when I was meditating at different points during juice feasting, I would literally feel like I was being electrocuted. The energy that was coming in was so intense, because when you don't have solid food coming through your system, there's much less obstruction in your system. And so the energy flow, the prana, is really, really intense. And I actually also started to set off car alarms on the street. When I wasn't like rocking people's cars, my energy field was bumping so crazily. I would walk down the street and it would be like beep, 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 beep. So I'm not saying if you go raw, or you juice feast, that's what's going to happen, but that was some of my experiences. Oh, I forgot to hand out our email list. If you would love to be on our newsletter list, then you can sign up on there. We send out newsletters a couple of times a month. We have all kinds of things in there, like special offers, contests. I like doing giveaway contests. The last one was you had to send in a picture of yourself with a green mouth, and you could win some chlorella nuts. This time you got to send in a poem, and you can win Salma's new book, Salma from Pure Food and Wine. So there's always something fun on our newsletter list. All right, so that's a bit about my background. And what I would really love to share now is some of the top tips that I see seem to work pretty well for people to be happy and healthy. And there's a few kind of daily things that I like to share with people. If you could like work these into your daily rhythms, like new habits, if you're not already doing these things, the few foundational things. So one of them is to drink at least 1 green drink a day, if you're not doing that. I imagine a lot of you are. This looks like a very shiny audience. But the greens is where it's at. You know, the greens are what balance us, realkalize us, remineralize us. They're the foundation for being healthy no matter how you're eating. And for me, when I was growing up, I thought salads were like totally ridiculous. You know, I didn't eat stuff like that. If there wasn't meat in a meal, I'm not going to eat that. There's nothing there. But these days, that's kind of how I feel about greens. You know, like greens are like the core of it. So at least 1 green drink a day, whether that's a green juice or a green smoothie or even powdered greens in water, whatever it is. We live on the road, so a lot of the time I'm eating chlorella nuts, you know, little chlorella tablets rather than fresh stuff, because we just live on the road and we can't always get fresh stuff everywhere we go. Fresh is always best if you have a choice. But people often ask us, you know, how do you eat raw on the road? And that's one of the things. We take powdered greens or chlorella tablets everywhere we go, so that we always have something green. Another thing that I really like on the road is chia seed. Does anyone eat chia? Ooh, lots of chia fans. So I just love chia because it's so easy. You know, you soak this stuff in any liquid, and in like 10 minutes, it absorbs like 10 times its volume, and you have like a dessert, or you can even make it savory. You can, if you mix it with like almond milk or nut or seed milk, it's kind of like rice pudding. I love chia seed. And it's so good to travel with, because this is like a pound bag. This would probably make like 20 meals for you. You know, it's amazing. And you just got this one little bag with you. It's what the Aztec and Mayan warriors actually used to carry everywhere, the running messengers. I don't think they had it in a plastic bag like this, but, you know, they're like, woo, running around with a little pouch of this. So other daily things, eating seaweed every single day. Who does that already? Ooh, nice. So yeah, I do this because of my thyroid primarily, but if you're not into it, I would recommend at least sneaking little bits of seaweed into your daily intake in a smoothie or a little bit on a salad or something. I also thoroughly encourage renegading seaweeds into other people, if you can. Because seaweeds are the way to get minerals into us really easily, right? A lot of food that's coming from the land is very demineralized these days. So getting seaweeds, getting food from the ocean is a really quick and easy way of doing this. Irish moss, I think, is genius. Because this is a seaweed, but you mostly use it in desserts, right? It's genius. Like, most people are going to eat dessert if you give it to them. This is like one of the main tips for getting raw food into skeptical people is give them desserts. Don't even tell them it's raw. And if you then put Irish moss in there as well, you're renegading minerals into them. Don't tell them there's seaweed in there. It doesn't taste like it, you know. You put this stuff in and it gels it up, if you're not familiar with using this in desserts. Gels it into like a solid form. Yes. Make sure you rinse the fresh stuff really well, because it's covered in sand and salt and stuff like that. And then it just becomes flavorless and mineral rich. Okay, another thing to do every day, if you're not already, eat sprouts. Grow your own sprouts. We live on the road and we sprout everywhere we go. We sprout in nut milk bags. So, you know, you can do this anywhere. There's no easier, cheaper, faster way of having fresh greens year-round, pennies on the dollar right there in your kitchen. We always get asked questions like, how can I be raw in the wintertime? And how can I be raw? It's so expensive. All these kind of questions. Sprout, 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 sprout. This is like a little garden salad mix. Grow some little people like this in your kitchen and eat them. That's what we do. And along with sprouting, if you can grow other foods as well, then all the better. But usually sprouting is a kind of step forward for people with that, because a lot of people are very disconnected from their food source, and the idea of growing anything is kind of scary. So start in the kitchen. You know, there's no soil involved, you won't get your hands dirty. Just grow some sprouts and get going on your journey. Another thing I like to encourage is about sweets. I like sharing this tip because everybody likes desserts and likes sweet stuff. The tip is to make the choice for yourself, if this resonates for you, that everything sweet that goes into your body is a raw food. Just make that one choice alone and your health could probably improve by leaps and bounds if you're not already off the refined sugars. Refined sugars are incredibly damaging to the body. All of those cakes and cookies and Betty Crocker nonsense that you see in the middle aisles of the supermarkets. Make that one choice that everything sweet that goes into your body is a raw food, and you step away from that whole paradigm. And there are so many incredible raw food desserts out there, and cakes and cookies. You know, there's so many choices these days. My friend Kathy actually has a saying that I love. She says, "The middle aisles will kill you." I find that to be true. We don't go beyond the produce department anymore in the supermarkets, as I'm sure a lot of you do as well. And we actually, the other day, we went this funny way through the supermarket, and we went through one of those middle aisles. I was like, whoa! What are they doing? It's the same stuff, right? It's like a mad scientist experiment in there. It's like they take the same things, mix them up in a different way, put them in a different pretty package on the shelf, and people buy that stuff. People eat that stuff. That's the craziest thing. I mean, what do we get if we mix together wheat flour and water? Glue, right? You can post posters up with that stuff. People eat it 3 times a day or more. It's incredible the way that people are behaving. So, yeah, don't eat from the middle aisles, and don't eat anything that doesn't rot. That's an interesting one, right? Has anybody seen bionicburger.com? Oh, you've got to check that out. It's really cool. Go to bionicburger.com and you will see a literal McDonald's museum, McDonald's hamburger museum. This guy started in 1988 to collect McDonald's hamburgers. He actually started by mistake, and then he realized they're all completely intact. Since 1988, those things don't rot. Hence, American corpses aren't rotting, just to bring that point up again. So, yeah, step away from all of that kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to move on from that charming point to social things. This is, again, another major stumbling block that people usually bring up to us. How can I be raw as a social being? You know, how am I going to go to restaurants? How am I going to go to parties? All these kind of things. There's a few things I'd love to share about this. The main one is to be the change. You know, to be doing this for ourselves, to not be trying to change anybody else, because we cannot make other people's choices for them, right? That's what it comes down to. We see a lot of situations where people go raw and get super excited about it, and they want to change everybody around them, and it usually backfires. So hold this energy for ourselves and be like a beaming lighthouse of what's possible. And then if people come and ask you questions, answer the question they ask you. Don't tell them anything else. So if somebody asks you about MSM, tell them about MSM. Don't also tell them about bee pollen, chlorella, spirulina, goji berry. People get easily overwhelmed, you know, so socially keep it low key if you can, because confrontation is common, and where do you get your protein from questions are common. So that's what I encourage, is to keep it low key and seek support from the people who do understand what you're going through and what you're experiencing. And also be prepared for social situations. You know, if you look at the energy of most social gatherings with humans, it's not really about the food. It's not about, you know, everyone's gathering to share really good nutrition with each other. Otherwise, why would there be turkey carcasses all on the tables, you know? It's about the energies between the people. It's the associations. There's a lot of love in those situations usually. And so if you go into that situation and everybody else has all these strong connections with the food and they're excited, and you're there with like some celery sticks and some hummus, and you're just thinking like, what is everybody doing? You're probably not going to have the greatest time. You know, so I encourage people to be prepared for those kind of events. Bring food along that you feel excited about, just like everybody else is excited about the turkey carcasses and whatever. Bring things along that you're excited about and that you can share. Bring desserts. Put Irish moss in the desserts. Renegade stuff into people. And just enjoy the situation. You know, if you're there and you're telling everybody, you know, eating that hamburger is going to do this, 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 and this to you. I mean, it's not fun for anyone, right? So, you know, in social situations, keep it low-key is generally my guidance, and to connect with the people who do understand. We have so many resources these days for connecting with other people. Raw food, potlucks, and the internet is booming with places to connect with people. So, you know, reach out that way. All right, I will share a little bit now about emotional issues around food and cravings. As Mr. Monarch said, my most recent book is called Raw Emotions, and it's all about restructuring our emotional relationships with food, if that's something that we're excited to do. Not everybody is excited to do that, you know. Most humans, in my experience, have pretty strong emotional connections to food, whether they realize it or speak about it or not. You know, humans often seem to eat because they're happy, because they're sad, because they're celebrating, because they think they deserve it. That's a fascinating one. Or because they're bored. That's a really crazy one. Humans rarely seem to eat because they're physically hungry, physically needing some more fuel for this structure that they're in. So I was really fascinated by this, and I come from a background of emotional eating, compulsive eating, and I wanted to really delve into this and help other people to restructure their emotional relationship with food if they want to. That's what this book is all about. It's very pretty. You can take a look inside. There's like nice pictures, and it's printed on recycled paper with veggie inks, and we give $1 from every book to organizations who plant trees. There's a lot of love in this book, and that's how I really wanted it to be, kind of like a daily retreat, a daily guide for people to help them in their new journey. Has anyone read this book? A few of you? Cool. It just came out a few months ago, and we're getting amazing feedback about it. So some of the things that I love to share about you know, raw food and the emotional connection with food. Raw food can help us moving away from our emotional connections with food, because, you know, eating a bunch of kale isn't going to numb you in the same way as eating a Betty Crocker cake, right? I think we all realize that. So it's a step in a direction that can really help you. And at the same time, being a raw foodist does not equal suddenly you have no emotional connection with food. So you'll see people go raw and they're eating non-stop all day long, and they're not necessarily feeling so great. And I recognized this in myself when I was a raw foodist, and my outlook on what counted as food had completely changed. You know, I was only interested in things that were raw food, raw vegan food, and yet I would have put any of it in my mouth at any point. You know, so I could see that my relationship was still very skewed with food. So I began to look into this, you know, what can I do about this? How can I shift my emotional relationship with food? And that's what the majority of this book is all about, the social stuff, the emotional stuff, the stuff beyond the physical ins and outs with food. You know, it's not all about calories in, calories out. There's so much more to it. When I got into the raw food lifestyle, I got into this for weight loss. You know, it was very superficial. I had no idea about all the other stuff that was going to go on. My life has flip-flopped completely, emotionally, socially, psychologically, spiritually, romantically, you name it, Lee, my life is completely different. I read my diaries from the old days, and I'm like, who wrote this stuff, you know? I was so toxic in my thinking, in my relationship with food, with people, with everything. So I'm very grateful that my life is very different now. And some of the things that I like to share with people about managing that relationship with food, the one key thing in the beginning is to ask yourself questions. Whenever you have some crazy craving towards some kind of food, or you're eating something and you just can't stop, ask yourself questions. Okay, when did I last eat? How much water have I drunk today? Am I genuinely feeling a physical pulling here in my anatomy, in my stomach? Is there a sensation of physical hunger, or is it all going on up here? You know, who's speaking louder? Is your mind and maybe your taste buds, are they speaking the loudest, or is your physical anatomy actually saying, hey, can we have some more fuel now? A lot of the time for people it's coming from here. So if you just take a step back when you get that driving force to eat something and ask yourself some questions, take a little bit of a breathing space, ask yourself questions, you might find you don't necessarily feel the aching desire to reach out and have that automatic reaction and end up with something in your mouth. Ultimately, it's all about stimulation most of the time for people, right? You're looking for something else outside of yourself to stimulate you and to help you change your mood and feel better. It doesn't have to come from food. We have at least 5 senses, right? We've got touch, we've got taste, we've got this one, we've got all these different things. It doesn't always have to come from you putting something in your mouth for you to feel better and to change your mood. Maybe go and take a really nice bath. Maybe go and have a cuddle with someone. You know, if you can get from the point of you have to eat that piece of chocolate cake right now to having a nice hug with someone and then you feel better, that's incredible. You know, if you can shift your dynamic that much and to recognize what's truly going on, that it's not that your body wants you to eat the Betty Crocker cake. Your body doesn't want you to eat that stuff. Your body is always wanting to move towards optimal health. The mind, however, loves that kind of stuff. You know, the mind loves the games. The mind wants this, it wants that. So ask yourself questions. Where is the hunger coming from? Drink lots of liquids. I would think a lot of you do this already. One of my main ways of getting lots of liquids into my body is to drink at least a quart of fresh water every morning. The first thing I take into my body, at least a quart of water. It helps me to set myself up for the day. You know, if I don't have that, I don't feel good. I also do meditation and yoga every single morning. You know, move your body, move around so that you're not in this kind of stagnation point all the time and you're just fixated on food, if that's a pattern for you. These bodies were made to move, you know. If you're doing meditation every day, you can help to create focus for yourself about why you're here. You know, why are you showing up here today? That's what I look into when I go into meditation every day. Why am I here today? How do I want to show up? What do I want my relationship with food to look like? My relationship with other people? I send love out to everybody who comes to my intention, you know, comes to my focus. Doing these kind of things can really help to set us up into a nice pace for the day, so that we're not just kind of randomly flibbling and flabbling through the day, eating this and that, and not really knowing what we're doing here. So that, you know, if you have a structure like that, you might even write it down, what you intend to eat for the day. This has been a huge help for me at many points in my history. In the morning, write down, okay, this is what I'm going to eat today, and stick to it. You know, now to many people that might sound horrendously left-brained and structured. It's just an idea. You know, all of this is just ideas. Take from it whatever speaks to you and is useful to you, and you can leave the rest. You know, so it's an idea. Maybe that can be helpful to you to write down what you intend to eat. Give yourself a bit of structure. Another thing that I find useful for people around cravings, to stop eating at the end of a meal, is to have things ready to do at the end of a meal. You know, many people can start eating and they feel like they're doing okay, and then they just can't finish the meal. They just want to keep going and going and going. So have things planned at the end of the meal. Have little exercises maybe that you go and do, whether it's clearing out a drawer or speaking on the phone to someone, going for a little walk. Go and brush your teeth. You know, if you have a mouthful of clean teeth, you probably don't want to carry on eating. Drink some tea. That's always been a huge help to me. If I get like some warm, yummy liquid going into my body, rather than eating something more, it's like I'm getting that sense of something yummy and warm, and I'm not taking in a load of extra calories at the same time. You know, warm teas have been very, very useful for me on my journey. I actually think, you know, most people seem to have an oral fixation, and I feel like many adults, especially in our societies, are still looking for breast milk. You know, many people weren't breastfed. If you have like a warm tea and you put like some almond milk or something in there and it's yummy and it's sweet, it's like getting breast milk for many people, right? Whether that's a conscious connection or not, I think it really helps people to stay on track more. And the one thing that I also really love to share about in my talks is connecting more with nature. I feel like this is a vital part of the picture. Most of us seem to be chronically disconnected from nature, and there's a few questions I like to ask audiences to maybe help us to think a little bit more about this. One of them is, how many times in the space of an average day do you touch the surface of the earth with your body, with your skin? How many animals and plants do you have a daily relationship with compared to how many machines? These kind of things are kind of telling, right? You know, many of us are very disconnected. And my vision, personally, for moving forward with my health and my path in life is to get to our piece of land. We have land down in Ecuador. And to just start growing food and raising children down there in a community. That's what I've seen for years. And that's what I would love to see happening more and more with the raw foods movement, with anybody, you know. For people to be connected more to the land and growing our own food, to me that's a true pathway to freedom. You know, most of us right now in these societies are in these very fast-paced lives, the whole rat race thing. To me that's just not what I want to be participating in at all, and I choose to step out of that. And my biggest inspiration on this path has been the Anastasia books. Has anybody read these books? Whoa, has anybody not heard of these books? All right. This always feels like an incredible honor to me to pass on this information. These books, nothing has influenced my life more in the last years than these books, the Anastasia books. They have now sold apparently more than 30 million copies worldwide, and they've never had any advertising. It's all word of mouth. These books are literally changing the face of the planet. There are eco-villages popping up all over the place. People are getting to the land and growing their food, connecting more with nature as a result of reading these books. So what are they? What's this all about? Well, it's a series of 9 books. This is the first one. And this one's called Anastasia. The whole series is called The Ringing Cedars of Russia. Now, the books are all about this woman, Anastasia. She is a woman who lives contemporary with us. She lives out in Russia in the wild. She's about 40 years old right now. She is completely wild. She's a human, but she's very, very different to most of us, I would imagine. She, in these books, the author relays his encounters with her. That's what they're all about. And the way I like to try and summarize it is she relays through these books what's possible for humans. So she lives out in the wild, and she doesn't have a house. She doesn't have pretty much any clothes. She lives in the forest. She's like truly raw. You know, she's not eating like raw blueberry cheesecake and stuff like that. She eats like a couple of berries over here and a couple of nuts. She's just out there, totally wild, totally connected to nature and the universe and the animals and the plants. And I'm sure we've all heard the concept that we use maybe 5 to 10% of our capacity, right, as humans. In here, many of the things that she shares are about what we can truly do, what we're truly capable of. And some of it might just completely blow your whole idea of reality away. The author, his name is Vladimir Magray. So they're from Russia. These are the English versions. They're in like 30 languages or something. I'm sorry if there's anybody Russian in here and I just totally sabotage that name, but it's something like that. Vladimir Magray. Now, the one thing that spoke to me the most about these books is Anastasia's vision for us to be moving forward as a species, as humanity, is for everybody to be on a piece of land growing their own food. It's that simple, right? If you're living on a piece of land, you've got food growing all around you, you've got people all around you in community doing the same kind of thing. What more do you want or need? You know, it's that simple. There's another wonderful resource that really inspires me along these lines called pathwaytofreedom.com. It's about exactly the same thing, same lifestyle, be on a piece of land, grow your own food. What I love about this is that the pathwaytofreedom.com people are in Pasadena, down south, California, and they live on a totally average house plot on a totally average street in Pasadena. It's just like average paradise. They started growing food about 20 years ago, and there's not like an inch of their property now that doesn't have food growing on it. And you can watch little videos of them. They go out into their garden with like a salad bowl, and they just pick into the salad bowl, sit down, and that's lunch. I mean, who doesn't want that, right? There's so many issues around food safety these days. I'm sure you guys all know about the almonds, or the almonds are pasteurized here now. I recently heard about a bill that apparently they're trying to put through to irradiate all the leafy greens. Yeah, there's crazy stuff going on. I'm sure we've all heard of Codex and Monsanto and yada, yada, yada. Personally, I try and keep my energy off all of that kind of stuff, and I focus on being on my own piece of land and growing my food. You know, that's where I put my energy flow, and growing my sprouts on the road. You know, I live on the road. I don't have any land to plant in right now, but I can sprout. So I'm going to quickly tell you about my other two books as well, because I forgot to mention these. This was my first ever book. It's called How to Go Raw for Weight Loss, and it's like a step-by-step guide for anyone who is not familiar with this lifestyle and is trying to get themselves into it. And then my second one was called Revealing the Physical Changes. It's all about the physical stuff that starts to shift when we go raw, like the changes with the colon, the changes with the skin, the detox. How can we support the detox by doing things like skin brushing and tongue scraping and enemas and all of these kind of things. So I also would love to tell you that if you've never seen my singing videos on YouTube, then please check those out. That's where my real passion is as well, is making raw food songs. Has anyone seen any of my songs? Ah! Sing one? All right. I'll sing a bit of my favorite things. I like to make raw food versions of musical songs. If you haven't seen them, you can check them out on YouTube. Okay, a few of my favorite things goes... Green juice with apple and hemp seeds with pollen, spirulina slices and melons by the dozen, banana ice cream, that's good for me. These are a few of my favorite things. Do, 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 do. Magical durian parties, oh wow. Loved up on maca and blissed out on cacao. People who don't ask where do you get protein. These are a few of my favorite things. When your stomach hurts, when your colon aches, 'cause you're eating sad, simply remember to eat more raw food, and then you won't feel so bad. So that's my passion. I hope to write a whole raw food musical, and you can check that out. So I always like to summarize at the end by saying I truly feel like if I can do this, anyone can. You know, you've maybe seen the pictures now that I passed around. Okay, you can come and see them at our desk if you haven't seen them. We have a big booth down there. 7, 8 years ago, I was literally eating myself into the grave, and here I am. You know, one of the healthiest people I know, and believe me, I never thought I would be the person standing up here saying that. So I wish you guys all the very best, and thank you for coming to listen.